How many of us get caught in analysis paralysis and then the opportunity passes us by, right? Everybody. That's a function of getting stuck in your left brain and looking at all the different possibilities instead of just making a move. Even if that move's a mistake, now you have a feedback and you move off that, right? So we're getting into the right brain. So all of this, we get to our reason too. And I experience this constantly, not constantly, but I experience it in direct proportion with the amount of training that I'm doing in this particular manner, which I've laid out for you. Because I go through periods where I'll just do my jiu-jitsu, and I'll just work my striking, and it's not the same. Because although there is spontaneity in it, it's not flowing, and the pressure isn't there. It's not from scenario to scenario, so the focus is different, right? You might be isolated and using more body focus rather than your focus out there. But you get in the zone, what I call the flow state, more often, right? And everybody in this room, I would suggest, has been in the zone in something, right? You're like, man, I was in the zone. It could be a video game. It could be picking chicks up. It could be at work, at a business presentation. But you're in the zone. And there's a certain phenomena of certain, because it's going to be different depending on your context, right? Being in the zone in a business meeting is different than being in the zone in a street fight, right? But being in the zone, there's a good book called Flow. It's on flow psychology. It's been around for years, but that's a good book to pick up. And there's a certain characteristics in this. And what we find is that we've already talked about it, but you're uniquely in the present moment. The past and the future are of no consequence. You are at one with what is. You're at one with the activity, right? Surfers say this all the time. They're at one, they're in the Zen, right? They're in the zone. They've got Zen. They're at one with the waves and everything. And that's because you're in the present moment. Your focus is on the activity, and you're involved with the activity. And I have a saying that how you do anything is how you do everything. How you tie your shoe is how you fight, right? If you're abstracted enough to think it, how you express yourself as you tie your shoe is similar in some way to how you actually fight. It's similar to how you go get groceries, right? Because you are constantly expressing who and what you are about at all times. You cannot not communicate, right? You can sit there and not say anything, but you're still communicating and expressing yourself. And if you're abstract enough to kind of see what, what the correlations is, then by changing one area of your life, you change the others, right? And what we find is that we find ourselves in the zone more often. You're in the present moment. You're responding like an echo. I had this experience in the club once. I was just picking chicks up left and right, and I said the exact right thing that they needed to hear at every time, every turn. It doesn't happen all the time, right? I'm married now, but I was in the zone. I was flowing. But it's that ability to recognize what they need, what the situation needs, and give it to it, right? You're responding like an echo. But this is the biggest thing. This is the biggest thing. There is no fear. For some reason, we live in a fearful society. I don't particularly think I'm a fearful guy. Sometimes I don't like to fly and I don't like heights. But I believe, and I never notice, I don't walk around afraid too often. There are some people that walk and carry more fear. But I believe we have a fear programming society. There's a lot of fear that's artificially programmed into us. And you don't even notice it. But you do notice it when it goes away. Because you're all of a sudden, you're accepting challenges, and I don't mean fights, but you're accepting challenges and taking care of problems because the fear is no longer, you don't fear the consequences. It's not there, and you can feel it. It feels like a drug. Like you feel you could jump off a building. You're not going to do that, but you're not afraid of it. There is no fear, and that is the biggest thing. And this is where we get to reason 3. And this is kind of strange. After time, we're training, right? We're training. We have a pretty good reason for training. We want to survive. We don't want to be a victim of violence. And so we structure our training that way. And through the training, it changes us. And you find yourself in the zone more often in more areas of your life. After a while, my contention is that those changes get locked into your identity, right? And now all of a sudden, this is the third reason, it's like somebody switches you on. You've reached a new level of the game, right? I call it the actualization of your intent. Or you could call it the actualization of being a man, because it does awaken certain primal instincts within you, right? But your actualization of your intent. Now you're walking through the world more in the present moment. You're more in line with what is, right? Because you're used to responding. Your focus is different. And what you find is, the first thing you'll notice, and in my experience I noticed this, you start influencing people and events simply with your intent, right? This isn't persuasion, but you're influencing people and events just by showing up, right? And it's almost as if you show up, the door opens right as you get to the door. And sometimes there's a hot chick there and she baked you a pie and you get other goodies with it. But you influence people and events simply by showing up, right? It's a kind of a weird thing, and I'll kind of explain why I think that happens. I mentioned it before, but you cannot not communicate. And people, the way we're designed, are subconsciously picking up everything around us. And we're assimilating a tremendous amount of information. So you are aware of everything that the person next to you is about. Not consciously, but we are constantly broadcasting everything we are about. Who we are, what we've done, all of that. And you're picking it up on some level. And when you start making these changes, what happens when you're switched on, by the fact that you're spontaneous, you're responding, you start solving more problems, right? In other words, you're at the business meeting, your manager's like, he's always got something that he needs somebody to take care of, and you just pass on it because you don't want the extra work, right? And that's really a fear-based response because you're fearing missing out on something else. Well, suddenly, you just start, when that fear's gone, you just start solving problems, which creates more opportunities in your life, right? So you just automatically solve, and when you solve people's problems, and they unconsciously pick up on it, they start looking to you to solve problems. And the more problems you solve for more people, there seems to be a mechanism at work that you get more opportunity and good things to happen for you, right? That's the truth. But you solve problems, and by default, you become a leader, right? It's once again, it's not something where you're like, I'm going to lead you guys, or you're just, but because by default that you're a problem solver, people will put you on that pedestal, right? And don't the best leaders solve problems? High-powered CEOs, they walk into a place, they have no fear, and they turn companies around, right? They're the go-to guy. And through this training, I've experienced it. It's a direct correlation with training in a specific way because you're training your focus. You're now carrying yourself differently. People unconsciously notice that, and they just treat you that way. And so you're influencing people simply by showing up. It's a weird thing. And it is. If you stop training, you can go back, and it doesn't happen as often. But you're a leader. And this is the weirdest thing. And I debated about bringing it up, but I don't care. What I find is that when you're switched on, you have this thing called synchronicities happening more often. And I'm going to share a story about that. But synchronicities, I believe, are a function of you functioning at a higher level, right? And they've done studies. Basically, all a synchronicity is, if you were to calculate the probability of that event happening in that particular way, there's no way it could happen. It's like events outside of yourself have coincided, and there is no physical way. You think of somebody you haven't thought about in 10 years, and they call you at that instant. Everybody's had that in some form. But synchronicities go a little bit beyond that, and I'll explain what I believe happens. But I was in Vegas with a friend of mine, and she was in real estate. This was years ago. And I had an idea for a company called, that I was going to market to e-loans. It was a valuation online company. And I was going to market specifically to e-loans. And so on our way back from the hotel, we were on the side street. We were driving back to LA. I told her and pitched her my idea because I wanted her feedback, right? She was also in real estate. So we had a 10-minute long conversation about this company, and as we're pulling onto the freeway, this car was already on the freeway, and it pulls in front of us, and its vanity license plate from California, the one and only person who owns this license plate, said e-loan on it, right? And we both, and I share this because I have a witness, and we both went, that's beyond coincidental. That's pretty crazy. But I have a theory about that. There was a study in Cornell. And what they found is they found that a certain percentage of people perceive in the future, albeit a couple seconds. right? They've done a replicable study that people have duplicated. And what they found is they got different control groups, and I believe they did 9 tests, and 8 of the 9 showed that they flashed them different images. And some of the images were erotic and emotionally laden, right? And they were randomly generated, and they tested people's physiology, their physiological responses. And what they found is that a large number, more than what should have been expected, started to respond before the erotic images 2 to 3 seconds before even the computer selected those images, right? So what if, as a side effect of me training, for some reason my mind perceived a little bit further in the future, saw a flash of Elon, which prompted me to have that whole conversation ending with the thing that triggered it in the first place, right? So I'm not saying there isn't a logical explanation to this, but I do believe that through the training, it changes you physiologically. And you may or may not experience this, but I have, and many, many times. And I believe that that's part of the mechanism. But I want to end with a story, actually, which I believe is perfect for the actualization of being a man. And it's a good example, because I do believe in our recent past that men were different just by the fact of how society was, right? My grandfather is a farmer, so he was used to getting his hands. We didn't have all the distractions. Life wasn't as hectic, right? We didn't have all those distractions. But my grandfather, he grew up in Nazi Germany. He died before I was born. I never met him. And when he was a kid, during World War I, he was playing in a tavern, and he wasn't supposed to be there at night. And some soldiers brought some of the locals down into the basement where he was playing, so he had to hide. And as he was hiding, right in front of him, they proceeded to torture these guys and cut their tongues out, right, as a sign for them for the town not to talk. So imagine being a kid a few feet away from this horrific thing, and on top of that, having to be quiet so that you're going to get discovered and probably get your tongue cut out, right? I can't imagine that. Well, years later, in World War II, my grandfather was older. He recognized what was happening when Hitler was coming to power. So he grabbed my grandmother, he grabbed some family friends and some other family members. They fled to Mexico, right? And while he was in Mexico, he started a farm there. He employed a bunch of the locals to work the land, right? And one day the banditos came into his farm, right? And they started beating up his workers and extorting money from them. So the story goes there was about a dozen of them, and he went out, he grabbed a hoe. It wasn't my grandmother, but he grabbed a hoe, right? she was pleading with him not to do this, but he said, no, I have to go out there. It's my duty. These are my men. He went out there, and whatever transpired, right, he made such an impression on them, I dare say with his intent, right, to put himself in harm's way. He went out there and not only backed them all down, they returned the money and they never came back, right? And I thought, oh, man, what an amazing person. And if that's not enough of a testament to the character of being a man, right? Shortly after that, he and his workers were carrying, they had a cart, but they were carrying it on their back, and it had wheels. And they had, I don't know if it was fertilizer or what, but it was probably between 600 and 1,000 pounds. It took 6 men to move this. Well, while they were moving it, the wheels broke, right? So my grandfather held up this 600 to 1,000 pounds by himself so everybody could get out safely, breaking his back in the process. And I was like, holy shit, I would have just dropped it and ran. But, to this day, I'm upset that I never got to meet the man, but I'm like, wow, what an amazing human being. But something about those stories always bothered me.
When it comes to violence, intense situations, and even transitioning into business and being the better expression of yourself. He's a first-degree black belt under William Vandry. He also has trained with Paul Vunak, certified JKD instructor. The list goes on and on. Mr. Ed Aiken. What's up, man?
Oh, yeah. Thank you. All right. So this is my second time at the 21 convention. Where is my system? Where is my, what I'm relying on, where is it limited? And you start filling in the holes with those things, those other systems that work, right? But we need a philosophy. And this is really important. what the correlations is, then by changing one area of your life, you change the others, right? And what we find is that we find ourselves in the zone more often. You're in the present moment. You're responding like an echo.